All right, Digging Deeper listeners, it has been a little while, but we are back with new episodes of Digging Deeper. I have Mark to my right. Mark, how you doing?
Doing good.
Good,
Thanks.
good. And we have a new guest with us. Not new to us, but new to the podcast, Terry Fry. Terry, how are you doing?
I'm good. Thank
You guys enjoying this hot day?
I didn't realize how hot it was until I went outside because it was inside all day. But at least it's blue skies. So that's awesome.
You know, football's starting up. I'm ready for fall, but the weather's not ready for fall, so I'm pretty bummed right now.
Yeah. A little smoky out there.
Yeah, a little smoky.
Yeah.
A little smoky, but we'll get through it. Always do. Get through smoke season. Listeners, we did take a little bit of a break. For those of you that rewatched or maybe watched for the first time, our very first Digging Deeper episode, way back at the height of the pandemic, 2020.
That's painful.
It was you and Austin on
Zoom.
On the Zoom.
Yeah. We were low tech.
Yeah, we will hopefully never go back. But it is interesting to think about all that has happened over. We do praise the Lord for opportunities to start something like this. I was even kind of on a personal note, remembering when I took some time away from Digging Deeper because of the birth of our daughter. And now this Saturday, celebrating her 1-year birthday, trying to figure out where that time went in between. But all that to say, we are here, we are ready, and we are focusing on spiritual disciplines.
It's funny. We thought Digging Deeper would be a couple weeks.
Yeah.
Just to kind of get us through the short COVID.
Right.
Because we wanted to get the word and get truth and because, we were shut down. So let's get stuff out there. And
give people
here we are, like over 3 years or so later or something.
Over 100 episodes, and it still seems to be an attractive, something that we offer that people like. So we are excited about that. So we are talking about the spiritual discipline or spiritual practice of life together, and that's what we're gonna call it, life together. Some might know it as the word fellowship, but we're gonna kind of get to that distinction here in a minute. Why we want to present it the way we do. But Terry, I want you to kick us off. Quick refresher on spiritual disciplines, because it has been a while, why they are important in our life. And so with this specific practice, how do we see it played out in Jesus' life? Going to throw those two to you.
Okay.
See what happens.
First off, I see spiritual disciplines as kind of being the spiritual fortitude or the scaffolding that kind of holds our spiritual life together. So you can't build a building without a foundation, without some essentials like concrete and wood. The same is true in our spiritual life. And so when I was pondering what I saw the disciplines as, prayer, solitude and silence, fasting, Sabbath, which we just talked about throughout August, and then fellowship being one of those as well. I saw those in kind of like a word picture, and so I'll just throw that out to you guys. I saw that as as we actively pursue those things in our life, it's almost like our soul is like an empty cup, and it's almost like it's being filled up with water. And as life circumstances happen to us or people's needs come to us, our cup gets a little depleted, And so if we're not filling those things into our cup, into our soul through the disciplines on a regular basis, we just become empty. And then especially as those around us, because needs don't stop in ministry and fellowship and community, we don't want to get to a point in our lives where we have nothing but a few drops to hand someone. And so that's kind of the visual that I saw in my own mind of what the spiritual disciplines are to our soul. And so we want to come to that place where we're not totally emptied out, but we're kind of refilling on a regular basis.
Yeah. So I love that response. A quick pause though for background. Now, the reason why it was on my heart to ask you, so spiritual formation, you went to school for that, correct?
I did.
Yeah.
Yes.
So this idea of understanding of these disciplines has been something you have been immersed in for quite some time.
Yeah, I would say, I've always been a person of prayer, but I would say, pursuing the ones that I'm a little bit uncomfortable with has been intentional, but it's been good because it's been stretching, which is good.
Love that verse. Paul says, he's endeavoring in his ministry until Christ is formed in you. That Galatians, I think. So that's where that spiritual formation
Yeah.
term. Some people are, where's that term come from? Well, it's in the Bible.
Yeah.
Right.
That it is Christ being formed. What I love about the practice is it's like the way of Jesus.
Very much so.
Right, like we want to be with him, and we want to be like him, and so the practices are just essentially like what did he do, and I also like, and you hit on this, Terry. It's like more the training of the Christian life, where it helps us to be in a position where the Spirit can have his way in our life, and we can be more in relationship, so that he will work out his fruit
Very much
in
so.
us. So.
Very much so.
But if we don't ever train or have that scaffolding, then we can sort of get undisciplined in our walk.
Yeah. Yeah.
Totally. So I feel like I might have asked this before, kind of a silly question, but if somebody were to ask you, how many spiritual disciplines are there? I'm asking this question because it is such a broad, and honestly, maybe it doesn't need to be numbered, but how would you guys respond to a question like that? And I think I'm just trying to paint the picture of just the vast opportunities there are, I think, to pursue disciplines. There's so many, but do you guys have a number, ballpark?
I think a lot more than we realize.
Okay.
Like I was talking to you earlier, Tim, about the book Spiritual Disciplines Handbook by Nancy Adele Calhoun, and there's got to be probably 30 some odd disciplines that are in this book, and one of them, which I wasn't aware of until probably like about 5 years ago, was the discipline of unplugging.
Yeah.
Just being able to get off social media, or slow down your Netflix consumption or anything like that. And so there's a wide variety of them out there, rather than just the few that we know
Right.
that are kind of those ones that we're familiar with.
Right. Yeah. And these practices definitely weren't meant to be categorized and numbered,
Yeah.
but I think it is awesome to realize that it's not 12 or 9. It's 30, 40, 50, 100. Who knows? There's just all these different ways in which we can practice the way of Jesus, like you said.
Wouldn't we say, though, that throughout church history, there have been like a top, we might use different words, but, the word prayer, fasting, solitude, like there's always been like a dozen-ish, but the other day someone showed me like 71, or something like that.
Yeah.
And I had kind of an attitude about it, like, but there's no Bible verse that says that there's this many exactly. Like the
Right.
fruit of the Spirit, we know there's 9. The Bible's very clear. But like, why not have 71 if it's another way to really connect with the Spirit, and to have God have his way in our lives? Sure,
Absolutely.
Yeah, you just want to be
Absolutely.
careful. I'm practicing the discipline of Netflix binge watching. It's like, all right, well, yeah, not quite. But
Right.
yeah, so so I think back to you, Terry, unless you answered it and maybe I misheard, but this idea of how we see this discipline in Jesus' life.
Jesus was such a wonderful example, because he embodied all of these in such a balanced way, and yet he did it in a way that it was to get closer to the Father. It wasn't just a task to be done, but he did it because it was out of his love for the Father. And so I thought of just a practical example, and many examples, but especially from the Gospels, about him going away to a lonely or a desolate place. And I was reading in the portion of Matthew this morning where they were in the throes, Jesus and the disciples were in the throes of ministry. And it says that he sent, and I can't remember the word, but it was a pretty firm word. He sent the disciples out into the boat and said, go on the other side. And then he stayed and dispersed the crowd. And then at that point in time, he went away to a desolate place to be quiet and to be still with the Father. And I love that example, because what it showed me is that he didn't finish all the ministry opportunities. And I don't know if he had this intuitive ability, well, he might have, to just know, man, the disciples are getting exhausted right now. Like, I need to send them out. And you know what? I'm getting pretty depleted too, just physically, because he had that, what I would call just a really good self-awareness to know, like, I need to go and be quiet and be still, and kind of that filling back up of his cup. And so, yeah, I mean, those are just the examples I thought of when it said he went away to a quiet and a desolate place, so a place where he was alone. So those were the examples that I thought of, just in regards to solitude and silence.
Yeah, definitely.
Are you talking
Well, so,
also
yeah,
in
I
terms
guess,
of like this particular discipline?
A little
Life
bit
together?
that, but then also the discipline of life together, fellowship specifically. How we see
Because
it.
Terry just nailed it as far as like Jesus with his heart for
Yeah.
that space with his Father, and then getting his disciples there in that space too.
Yeah.
But like I was reflecting on, like if anyone could go it alone, it'd be Jesus. Like if anyone could pull off the spiritual life alone, I don't need any of y'all. Yeah, I mean Jesus could, but everything about his ministry, and not just methodology. I think at the heart, at the core, he wanted to live life with the disciples. Like I think we tend to think like they're just a bunch of bumpkins, running into things and messing everything up and giving Jesus a headache half the time.
Yeah.
But I think Jesus really loved these guys,
Yeah.
as well as the others, the more, well, maybe the women and others in the group that were around Jesus at the time, also not just the 12.
Right.
You think about the Garden of Gethsemane, and he's like, I need you guys here with me,
Yeah.
praying for me. Like, so, this idea that, well, I like Jesus. I don't know that I need people. I don't know that I need Christians in my life. It's just not true Christianity.
Absolutely.
No, yeah, very true.
Absolutely.
Couldn't have said it better myself. So, Mark, while we have the needle on you, what was the heart behind this idea for the leadership team choosing to kind of share this as life together?
Oh, rather than like...
Rather than maybe the fellowship that we're all...
Yeah, so I know that the word community is really a kind of a popular phrase to use for Christian relationships. I've always, I mean, that's fine. It's a great word. I like using it myself, but I tend to think of the community as the community, like Grants Pass.
Okay.
So I've been one to say, let's maybe not overuse that word community, but I've got no problem with it at all.
Right.
For us, for the fellowship. I think fellowship is just like pretty churchy, and it's a great word, but it sort of describes everything. Hey, the fellowship and the cookies and the coffee were really good today. It's like what do you mean by that? So fellowship maybe like other church words, good church Bible words can sort of miss their punch. Life together seems to be a little more meaty, and it's really Christians more than just once or twice come into a church service
Right.
Yeah.
a month, but it's being involved with other believers and sort of learning how to grow together and lift up one another and figure out, while they may not be best friends necessarily, but how do we do our Christian life more together?
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, yeah. So when I heard that, it kind of got me thinking, and you're totally right. So fellowship, community, not bad words at all. But I do think that when I hear those, that it could be a group of people centered around a task that they need to kind of take care of, where life together is just, I hear a simple desire for relationship, just being together. Obviously, there are things that you do together as far as tasks, but it's simply just enjoying, experiencing, processing life together. Something that Rachel and I have been able to do with your kids in our life, and that's what we kind of we do life together. And it's been great. But I hear a lot more of a relational kind
Absolutely.
of concept to this idea of life together than more of a, all right, we're gonna go fellowship. All right, I gotta do something or else I'm not fellowshipping. Well, it's like, no, we just have to do life together.
Right.
Okay, life. I can do life. I'm doing it
Yeah.
right now. So that's kind of what I hear when I hear the life together.
Yeah, I hear that. As you said that, the thing I hear the most is support. Here to support one another, and that means when we're in life together, it's not always pretty, but that's the times where we need each other the most, is when life is difficult or things are coming our way, where we just need the support of our other brothers and sisters to help us to know and to reaffirm, you're not alone in this. We're with you. We're with you.
It's like you can go to church or you can be the church.
Yeah.
And I don't know that there's a lot of scripture on just like, oh yeah, Christians go to church, that's it. And there's not much there.
Right.
But like being the church more like 7 days a week,
Yeah.
that's what we're talking about.
Yeah. And I also think that in our heart, obviously, is that new people are coming to our church, maybe new believers, and they're seeing this bookmark and seeing life together as a very, very understandable concept and something that they would want to dive into, as opposed to maybe, as you said, a church word where it's like, I don't know if I'm cut out for that. But this is a very like, okay, let's do it. It's very inviting, I think. So.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Well, yeah. So kind of as I'm getting ready to ask my next question about why this is important to the church and how we see it, I mean, I almost want to double down on that. And why is this more important now more than ever? And I'll leave this for you, Mark. I mean, why is this important to the church, but especially after what we just went through the last 2 years with the pandemic? Why does this feel maybe a little extra important, or if it does at all?
Man, so like, okay, pre-COVID, we all knew that our culture is hyper individualistic and hyper consumeristic. That's just kind of how we roll as Americans. So, you know, being a biblical church in that culture is tough versus, say, other cultures in the world that are very much relational, and they might have a leg up on us when it comes to New Testament Christianity. So pre-COVID, it was tough because of how, I go for me, and decisions I make in my spiritual life are more for me, and it wasn't working anymore for me. So that group I didn't like because, just a lot of me. And I'm not saying all decisions are bad when we think about ourselves and our family, but very few decisions based on, hey, what's really best for the group? What's really best for other people in my life? So then COVID hit, still trying to figure all that out, and devastating accelerated loneliness, and every social indicator, every metric is just doom and gloom on the impact, especially young people. So, yeah, I mean, this is actually a fun time to be the Church of Jesus and to say, hey, this is a time to really take seriously the beautiful relational component of our faith. Way more than a religion. It's being in life together. So, it's kind of my quick assessment on where we're at.
Very much so. I think what COVID showed us is that people could do being alone to a certain point. We can almost endure anything if we see a light at the end of the tunnel. But like for us, we didn't know when that was going to end. Right. And then we saw a rise in, addiction usage and domestic violence and some of these other things, even suicide. I have a dear friend that works at Options, and they were just scrambling. They could not meet the needs quick enough. And so it just really came to the surface that we're not meant to live isolated and alone for a long amount of time. It's just not how we're wired. So
it was super encouraging in our church to see how well life groups did.
Yeah.
And most continued to meet in some capacity.
Yeah.
And the church, by God's grace, stayed, pretty strong. In some respects, got even stronger because, we weren't able to do certain things, but we could continue to meet in the smaller groups. So.
Yeah. And I love seeing how as a bigger, corporately as the church, we changed some of our strategies to, I think how we operate in between services, how we operate before services, really trying to prioritize that gathering time around and through the service. And so it was kind of cool to see our response, specifically, River Valleys, but I know a lot of churches responded the same way. Like, all right, like we do need more coffee out there. We need some snacks. We need people to gather around and talk to each other and have something to talk about. And so that was pretty cool to see. But yeah, so my last question for you, Mark, before I want to pick Terry's brain, but like how do we see this played out specifically at our church here at River Valley? And yes, I am really trying to set up a plug for life groups, definitely. But life groups isn't the only one, but that included. How do you see this played out through our church?
Yeah, well, we want to try to keep the big picture. And like, I think it's easy for people to think that getting into relationships in a church is kind of like a 2.0. It's like a Christianity 2. I go to church, that's kind of 1.0. And then, I finally started hanging out with some people, got in a group, 2.0. And I get that as far as how we can tend to think, as far as commitment level and deepening. But like, relational Christianity is Christianity. Like, it's the pipeline of true Christianity. And I'll mention this at the end at resources, but I pointed out to the church months ago, there's this version online Bible called the Y'all version. So why all? Y'all. And the eye opener is in our Bibles, and we read every time where it says you. Hey, you, obey, you know. And we tend to think in terms of you, singular, first person you. The majority of those yous in the New Testament are the plural version of the you.
All y'all.
Y'all. Yeah.
All y'all.
Yeah. Yeah, you say that better than I do.
All y'all.
All y'all. So there's a sense in which, like, so anyway, this online version of the Bible, every time the you is that y'all, it's noted. And you're like, wow, that really changes the meaning of a lot of these, or I should say adds to the meaning of a lot of these passages. Because it's not just, hey, Mark, you should do this and you should do that. It's like, hey, this is y'all together. So that's important. All the one another's of the New Testament, all the body life imagery, 1 Corinthians 12 through 14. This is, sometimes, since we beat the life group drum pretty hard, sometimes we guys, ratchet it back a little bit. Well, this is really our best effort to get believers into regular, consistent Christianity, into like a rhythm, because to show up with the attitude, okay, I'm here to love these people and to try to help them build their faith, and I need it, like I need their input in my life more than anybody here. I truly think that when I go to group. So so our motto is connect or die, because good things and good things happen typically for people in connection. We know that biblically, we know that scientifically, and we also know that bad things happen for people that aren't in connection in all of the metrics. And you truly do thrive better in life if you're connected with a group of people.
Absolutely.
No, definitely. Yeah. Appreciate that. So now, Tara, I want to kind of shift our focus to what we had talked about earlier with this idea that these disciplines, specifically this one, reflect the life of Jesus. And the point of these, as us going through them, is to grow closer in relationship with him. So specifically with this idea of life together, how would you say that can grow us closer as an individual to Jesus?
I think in choosing to do life together, there's an intentionality there. So I think with that, there's also one's need to kind of step out of themselves, to step away from their fears or maybe their preconceptions about what a life together group would look like. And I would say just get out and do it. Like try it and give it some time. Like don't just quit after a couple meetings. Like I would say that's like quitting on your doctor after meeting him the first time, But these are, exactly. Like go hang out with them for a while, see what they're really like, get over some of your fears or your preconceptions, and begin to do life together. And just the joy that's there, and really it's invigorating to hear different aspects from others outside of my own. It's actually healthy. It's healthy.
Very, very healthy.
Yeah.
I think life group. First of all, we need to say life group is not a guarantee that life together will happen. I'll be the first to admit it.
Yeah.
I mean, we don't want to be legalistic on this.
Right.
However, it does establish that training, that environment, that scaffolding that can, I think, more easily draw people together. I mean, sometimes people have said, "Oh, it's just life group. It's not very deep. You really expect this thing to be like what the New Testament says?" Well, one of my answers to that is, where else do you, for the most part, gather weekly with a intentional meeting, a set group of people? They may not be your best friends, but they're people committed to grow together, and like weekly, set aside time to take that kind of stuff seriously. I think only good can happen with
Absolutely.
that. So I don't look at that as a light thing. I look at that as a pretty significant decision that the vast majority of people don't have that kind of group or that kind of, they might say I have best friends, but really how often are you really connecting, you know, with them? So I think it's just really important that we see life group as an environment where we can just truly love one another.
Yeah.
That's the key thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Exactly.
No, I totally I hear that, but I've definitely experienced like actually having friends outside of life group or because of life group that you are able to then literally do life together. I think being in the life group with you and Andy for the
Yeah.
past few years, kind of going back to what you said,
Right.
man, if anybody that's listening to this enjoys who I am, it's not because I shunned everyone from my life and I became the person I was. It is solely because of the people that were in my life that poured in, that helped you kind of restructure. Hey, that choice that you're making is pretty wacky. Like speaking into it, helping form, and I would say that's how all of us that have done life together with people would say. Like I'm not who I am because it was all me. It was actually people slowing me down and speaking into my life and humbling me and caring for me, and you just learn. Yeah, you learn so much about yourself. You learn about other possibilities, but also you network with people you never thought that you would know. And I know there's people that were in our life group, and things would happen outside of life group, and relationships were just very naturally formed.
Yeah.
But life groups was the ground in which that could be formed. So
Very much so.
Right on.
Very much so.
I think, you know, the benefits, some are very objective, very tangible. Some are very subjective. Like the objective ones, so let's say you spend more time working through the sermon and taking that to a deeper level. Like I often prepare and give the sermon, and then I get even more out of it in the group. I get this person's perspective, and I sometimes the Spirit opens my eyes to something. Like, man, I wish I would have thought of that to get, you know, in the sermon.
I can
Yeah.
rewind
So
time real
there's
quick.
very objective kinds of things. The objectivity of knowing that somebody else is battling the same struggle that I am. I thought I was the only knucklehead, and very afraid to share something. And then I realized a couple other people in the group were having the same issues. So that's a very just praying together and seeing God answer prayer. I mean, that's very objective. The one another's in action, love, encourage, build up, pray for. Those are very objective. But then there's a bunch of subjective stuff. It's like I just feel like I'm growing in this group. Like I just feel like this is helping me. So there are things that you can't necessarily quantify or put your fingers on.
Right.
But you just, so many times I go to a group, I'm like, oh, I wish I could just stay home tonight. But then afterwards, it's like I just felt like energized. Nothing actually even super profound happened. I just
Right.
felt like I was in the body, the presence of Christ.
Yep. Yeah. That being together, that being connected with
Right.
one another,
Right.
which is, I believe, just almost in a holistic way. You know, something special happens, something mystical happens when we are with one another.
Yeah.
Really, very much so.
Yeah, and just to even reinforce what you said, we're not saying that you go to a life group, your life will be changed dramatically,
Right.
but the odds of something in your life that is for the good
Right.
forming in your life because of life groups, it's a lot higher than if you didn't join the life group. I
Absolutely.
mean, just the relationships, everything that you guys said. It's So you're maybe listening to this and be like, I had a terrible life group experience. Those happen, but just the opportunities I think that come from, and again, not making them synonymous, but like life groups or doing life together with fellow believers, those can be the same thing. They can be different.
Right.
There's just so much that you can glean from that and learn from it and grow from it. So
You know, and sometimes I wonder, again, I'm not being judgmental because I get it. You can have a really bad experience sometimes. But I sometimes wonder, like, what does that actually mean? Does that mean it was a real hard person? Someone who was really, you know, difficult to be in group with or to love, or maybe you got offended? And I'm like, okay, that's not a good thing, but doesn't the Lord use stuff like that? Like, what about bearing with one another? What about, like, being patient and forgiving one another? And so sometimes even the hardest things that we are afraid will happen in groups, we pray won't happen, but when they do, they are an opportunity for sanctification and growth in people. We tend to think, oh, it's just the good, comfortable stuff that brings spiritual growth. But what about what I think you mentioned it earlier, what about when the group isn't really clicking on all cylinders, and maybe that person wasn't very nice to you.
Yeah.
You know, was it Dietrich Bonhoeffer who said something like, those who love their dream of community more than the community itself will be the destroyer of that community, even though they have good intentions. And I butchered it, but it was something like, and isn't that true?
Yeah.
Like, I'll speak for myself. Sometimes I have this idealistic view of what I think a group should be, and I love that more than the people.
So that is back on us, like checking our motives and really asking God, like, help me with these expectations. People are not meant to be my all in all, you know,
Right.
Christ is. And so coming into that with just healthy expectations.
Yeah. There was I recently, or actually a while back, a life group leader, the many good leaders we have in our church, and they were just sharing how they're kind of frustrated, like the group maybe wasn't as going as deep as they had hoped, and not quite as participatory, and that's not uncommon. You know, we've all experienced that as leaders. I definitely have, and the word the Spirit gave to me for this person was, hey, you know, just the fact that they're gathering, these adults are in the same room on a weekly basis, and it might sound shallow, but if you really listen to what they're talking to, like, those are life issues, kids, work, like, where else are they talking about those issues, and actually get some scripture. So yeah, maybe it's not as deep as you'd like, but there's a lot of good, and there's a lot of life that's happening there. And the person's like, oh yeah, thanks, I haven't really thought about it that way. They had their own version of their dream of community rather than just loving the people.
Yeah. It's good.
Well, let me tell you, the mettle or the strength and bond of your life group probably got tested if you were doing a life group during the cross culture series, even though we only were like meeting for half of it. But it was fascinating. While I was at Rogue River, some people were like, "Hey, any way our life groups can keep meeting to process this stuff? Because like we need it." So it was cool to see them wanting to go through that together. But yeah, definitely an opportunity for a lot of those tough conversations and patience and understanding, as you guys were talking about. So, well, I want to finish with my last question and kind of ask how, I guess this discipline, and I probably do maybe want to naturally step away from the idea of life groups, but more that doing life together. When I ask this question of, would you say that this spiritual discipline is natural for you? And then another one would be just how have you seen your practice of this discipline played out in your guys' life? So this one's to both of you. You can go ladies first.
I would say that when I was a new Christian, it was probably easy for me to try and do it alone. I don't know if I had this expectation that I should just immediately have it spiritually together. But as life came, as I became a new wife and a new mom, I just realized more and more like I need others around me. And we moved up here not knowing anybody, so we didn't have any family here. So our church actually was our family. Like they were there through the joys of childhood and also the difficulties when we had lost family members. And it was just so supportive. So I just felt undergirded by them through those difficulties of life. And so I would say as the older I get and the more as life has been thrown at us, or my husband and I, we just realized we need community. We're not meant to do this alone. So, yeah.
Okay.
Awesome, thanks. Well, you know, I like to say I kind of talk a big game on this because I know what the scripture says about it, and I've seen like what the Lord does through this when it's healthier. But personally, I can easily be drawn more to I'm more introverted. I think I get energized more like alone time. And so naturally, I could probably be one that would just stay home, do a project. You know, I could be very, very content. Now, you said something earlier, Terry, is very interesting about those spiritual disciplines that maybe we're not as naturally drawn to.
Right.
And isn't it interesting how, you know, those are the ones that we could be honest and say, okay, I do recharge more as an introvert and be aware of that. And that's okay. I don't have to feel guilty about that, but I should press into life together, press into this particular practice, because it doesn't necessarily matter what my comfort zone is. What matters is what I need most. And so long answer to your question is I've grown, and praise God for my wife, who's like so relational. And I do love relationships, but I could more easily wire towards the more alone time. And so we've tried to, in the last couple of years, especially with the kids long gone out of our home, to be in a couple groups a week as a way to be in community ourselves. Community, there's the word. Be in fellowship ourselves. At the same time, try to start groups, train new leaders, and get as many people connected, into groups as possible.
So life groups have actually been phenomenal for you in the sense of having that outlet to be able to grow in that. I guess. Yeah, that intentionality.
Well, like when I was sharing a little bit ago, like it's a forced, sounds terrible, but it really is a discipline in the sense that it's like, okay, made a commitment to be there. I mean, there's some weeks you got to miss for different reasons, but made a commitment to be there, and that is such a good thing to do, because the natural tendency, at least for me, might be, hey, I got a good game on tonight, or I just had a long day. I met with a lot of people today. I don't need to be in life group tonight, stuff like that.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay. Well, I appreciate those answers from you guys. I think for me, the intentionality behind doing life together, because I've always been super relational, no problem hanging out, being with people, but in a Christ-centered focus, doing life together is a little different, right? You are wanting to be intentional in how you're loving on each other, and just the well-being of the soul of the other people, and so it's been good for me to grow in my intentionality in that, as opposed to just sitting and watching the game or whatever, like actually being intentional and being in life together, as opposed to just being in life next to each other, I guess. So that's where I've grown. But as we wrap up this episode, I would love to hear some resources that you guys would be able to give to the listeners, and just what has helped you in your studies or understanding of fellowship, life together, spiritual disciplines in general.
I can talk on the area of spiritual disciplines. I already said Nancy Calhoun's book on the Spiritual Disciplines Handbook, anything by Ruth Haley Barton. I love Dallas Willard, some good resources too on spiritual disciplines. So those are kind of like my top ones.
Reinforcements of ones that I think have been shared before, but it's always good to revisit them. And I don't think we've heard Willard's name a few times on this podcast, so appreciate it. Mark, what about you?
And didn't someone say a while back that John Ortberg is kind of more of a simple approach, help people understand Dallas Willard.
Right. Yeah.
People like me understand Dallas Willard. So John Ortberg's got some stuff on spiritual disciplines. On this particular topic, the book by
Bonhoeffer, Living Together, or is it Life Together? Life Together. Yes.
Pretty small book.
Yeah, it's a great book.
And that you all version, it's YALL, so yallversion.com.
Okay. And we'll get these resources too in our e-newsletter as well.
Yeah. And there's so many more. I mean, Larry Crabb has had a great, but it's kind of old now, called Connecting.
Yep, have that book.
Yeah. I was reminded, number one selling book, I think, other than the Bible and Pilgrim's Progress, Christian, isn't it Purpose-Driven Life? I think Purpose-Driven Life is like, anyway, and he has a section in there on the church and life together that's really, really powerful.
Oh. All right. Man, I didn't know that.
Yeah.
That would have been a top 3 sell. Wow.
Yeah.
Cool.
Awesome. Well, you guys, thank you very much. Terry, this will not be the last time we have you on this
Good job, Terry.
podcast. Mark, always a joy. We've had you on quite a bit, and it's been good. So, listeners, hope you've enjoyed these, and we'll be back in a few weeks on Digging Deeper.
Just remember, rows are good, circles are better.
Life group sign-ups
One of our mottos. Rows are good, rows in church are good, circles are even better.
Amen. All right. See you later, guys.